I'm Elizabeth at A Literary Princess. If you are new here, welcome. I have a PhD in English literature with a focus on Victorian women novelists, and as you might expect, I love to read. Today I want to talk to you about a project I'm starting, but this is kind of different than the other projects that I have done and am doing, where I, in a year, go through all of the fiction of Elizabeth Gaskell, as I'm doing right now, or a selection of books from across the 18th century, as I did last year, or the works of George Eliot, which I did a few years ago, which ended up being 2 years because reasons. This is going to be a much more long-term project, and it's not going to be like scheduled out, like with I'm reading this book this month specifically. So what is this project? This project is reading all of the novels of Margaret Oliphant. Oliphant is my favorite Victorian writer. I have a whole video on her if you would like to go and look at that. And I have read, I think, 12 works by her. That is including novels, short stories, and her autobiography. However, she wrote 97 novels, which is a lot. And like, I really want to read everything she ever wrote. But it's like, every time I think about it, I'm like, wow, that's intimidating. How do you even start with that? So I came up with the idea to kind of make it into a project, but not like such a regimented project as my other ones. So I'm not going to be reading her books in publication order like I do usually. And I'm not going to have a specific time frame that I want to do these in. And I've also decided to start small, or smaller, by focusing on the 28 novels by her that I actually own. Most of them are on ebook in the Delphi Collected Works of Margaret Oliphant, but I do have a pretty fair few, like, physical copies. So I'm like, okay, we'll start with these 28, and then we will deal with the other 60-something at a later date. So I figured today we will go through what those 28 novels are, and then just kind of some thoughts on how I'm gonna do this and whatnot. Let's jump in. As I said, there are 28 novels by her that I own out of 97. And I'm only doing novels because if I included short fiction, we would be up to 176 works. That's a lot, given they're short works, but you know. So what constitutes a novel? As opposed to a short work of fiction, because a lot of times with Oliphant, they're like the same length. I am going by the website, the Margaret Oliphant Fiction Collection, and they have lists of all of her novels and all of her short fiction. And they have done it so it's considered short fiction if it never appeared on its own in a volume as a novel. So I am going with what they say. So some of these novels are fairly short and are like the same length as some of her novellas or short stories, but that's what we're going with. There are also several rereads in here, and I am going to be doing the rereads because A, I want to reread them, and B, I do want to make videos as I go. So there will be 7 rereads, technically 9, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. As I said, I'm not going to do these in this order. This is just the order they were published in. So let's go. The first one will be The Passages in the Life of Mrs. Margaret Maitland of Sunnyside, shortened to Margaret Maitland, published in 1849. This was Oliphant's first novel, and it was the first book that put her on the map. We then have Mirkland from 1851. Adam Graham from 1852, the lovely Victoria's Archives edition. A lot of these are Victoria's Archives editions if I have them in physical copies. Christian Melville. Now this is very interesting. This was published in 1856, but it would have been written between 1844 and 1845. So it was actually her first novel written. And it was actually published as by her brother. So there's a whole confusion there. She did not really think that much of this book. She's rather dismissive of it in her autobiography, which I guess is why she was fine with it being attributed to her brother. I don't really know. But it is fairly autobiographical, apparently. Days of My Life from 1857. The House on the Moor from 1861. We have The Doctor's Family, which I have in a bind-up with The Executor and The Rector, which are the first two short stories in the Chronicles of Carlingford. And The Doctor's Family is the third work in the series. So I will be rereading The Executor and The Rector because I do want to reread the series in full, and also they're here. So these were serialized between 1861 and 1862 and then put out in volume form in 1863. I love The Doctor's Family, so I'm very much looking forward to it, and to rereading The Executor and The Rector as well. Next up is another Carlingford book, Salem Chapel, serialized from 1862 to 1863 and put out in volume form in 1863. So this is another reread. I wrote a whole dissertation chapter on this, and I have actually read it twice, so I will be rereading it for the second time and reading it for the third time. And yeah, this holds a very special place in my heart because I did write on it in my dissertation, and I am excited to read it again. The Perpetual Curate, serialized from 1863 to 1864 and published in volume form in 1864. This is the only Chronicle of Carlingford I don't have a copy of, like physically. I have it on ebook. So maybe physical copy will materialize at some point throughout this project. We then have what I consider my favorite Oliphant book, and that is Miss Marchbanks, another Carlingford, serialized from 1865 to 1866 and put out in volume form in 1866. I'm so excited to reread this. And also to read the Carlingford books in order because I read them horribly out of order. I read this first, and then the next and last book, and then like the fourth book, and then went to the beginning. I should read things in order. I also finally got that horrid used bookstore sticker off of here, mostly. There's still some goop, and it was a very painstaking process with a hairdryer, and my nails are a little bit wrecked from it, and it's still kind of sticky and gross, but yay. Madonna Mary, serialized in 1866 and put out in volume form in 1867. At His Gates, serialized and put out in volume form in 1872. The Curate in Charge, serialized from 1875 to 1876, put out in volume form in 1876. I am giving these dates because Victorian literature can be so weird with like when were things published because like the serialization date is different than the volume date, and we usually go by the volume date when we're citing, but I feel like it's useful to give the serialization dates. And then the final Chronicle of Carlingford, Phoebe Jr. from 1876. Very excited to reread this one too. A Beleaguered City, put out in periodical in 1879. I'm not sure if it was serialized or if it was just put out all at once. It wasn't very clear on the website. And then published in volume form in 1880. Fugitives, also put out in periodical form in 1879 and not put out in volume form until 1890. Lady Jane, serialized in 1882 and then put out in volume form as The Duke's Daughter in 1890. The Ladies Lindors, serialized from 1882 to 1883 and published in volume form in 1883. I am actually hopefully going to be reading this in February, and it will be kind of the first book of the project, and I'm very excited for it. The Wizard's Son, serialized from 1882 to 1884, long serialization, and put out in volume form in 1884. The Ladies Walk, serialized from 1882 to 1883 and put out in volume form in 1897. You see, some of these dates are weird. Like, why? Okay. Sir Tom, serialized in 1883, put out in volume form in 1884. Hester from 1883. This is another reread. I actually just read this for the second time in October for Victober. It was our group read. So this will be coming like more toward the end of some of these other 27 books because, you know, I just reread this, even though I will happily read it again because I think this is the one to give Miss Marchbanks a run for its money as my favorite by her. I loved this. It's so good. Old Lady Mary from 1884. A Country Gentleman and His Family, serialized from 1885 to 1886, put out in volume form in 1886. The Mystery of Mrs. Glencaryll, serialized in 1889, put out in volume form in 1890. This will also be a reread. I have it in a bind up here with Queen Eleanor and Fair Rosamond, but I also have it in a bind up with another book, Sons and Daughters, which was serialized and put out in volume form in 1890. So I'll probably read it from here because I have them together, and it's short, obviously, together, and I'll probably just like read both of them when I get to them. But yeah, 2 copies of Mrs. Glencaryll. The Marriage of Eleanor, serialized in 1891, put out in volume form in 1892. And then finally, Dies Irae from 1895. So, 28 books. And then if I get copies of ones that are not on this list, I guess I can like add them as I go. And, you know, I'm like, okay, once these 28 are done, then I can start hunting down like online versions or whatever, or see if there's other free Kindle versions of other books. It was just like, these are the 28 that I have, and it seemed easiest to start there. So my plan for this is that I am going to do non-spoiler reviews, much in the style that I did for the books I read in Victober, which you can go check out the playlist there. So not as in-depth as like as the videos for my George Eliot project or the 18th century novel project, but still discussing themes and giving some quotes to give you an idea of what the book is like and my thoughts on it. Just no spoilers. And then depending on how many I have actually read between now and October, I might do a ranking for Victober. I don't know. I don't know how many of these I'm gonna get to this year. I don't have a plan for that. I would like to read a fair few because she's one of my favorite authors and I want to read more from her. And I would like to, you know, read all of her works, but we'll see what happens. Definitely when I've done all 28, there will be a ranking. And then I guess we will revisit like a part 2 video for the rest of the 63 or however else I'm gonna do this. Maybe another 20 something. I don't know. So yeah, I just wanted to share that with you and talk about like any chance to talk about Margaret Oliphant, and I will take it. But I wanted to share with you like what is kind of coming on this channel, hopefully, with some reviews of Margaret Oliphant books, and kind of give you an idea of what I'm trying to do long-term with this, like for a long-term project instead of just a year-long project. So let me know down in the comments, what have you read by Margaret Oliphant? Did you enjoy it? Have you read any of these that I have not read? And let me know what you think of them, please. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to see more of my bookish content. It has been great chatting with you. I will see you soon. Bye.